First of all, thank y'all for coming and spending about half an hour or so after a busy Tuesday teaching. In a minute, I'll introduce Dr. Jenna Hallman. She's the Executive Director of SARA, but just a little bit of like a little brief run through. What you're going to hear is a plan to do a 2-year cohort. So with the National Board Certification process, there's 4 parts that you submit. The reason that we're doing this year is that there was a Proviso created by our state legislature, which Dr. Hallman will talk about, which allows anyone beginning the process this year to receive that $5,000 stipend ongoing. It may be renewed next year, we don't know, but it was reviewed this year, so that's why this is a great opportunity to take part in that. As a cohort, you'll be kind of going through it as a group, and kind of the number of folks who want to undergo this for the next 2 years, that'll kind of determine what the structure of that cohort will look like. We're going to have current Anderson 2 National Board Certified teachers be mentors of that cohort, so they've gone through it before. Some of them have gone through the renewal process, so they've kind of gone through it twice, so we'll have their expertise to kind of guide us as we go through that together. And so I appreciate you spending this time this afternoon and the learning that will happen. Dr. Jenna Hallman is going to talk with us. She's a 2008 South Carolina Teacher of the Year and the current Executive Director of SARA. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Dr. Hall.
Thank you so much. All right, good afternoon, everybody.
Yes, that was Mr. Paul. Thank you.
I cannot tell you how excited I am to look out when Mr. Johns was giving me some numbers and he said, I think I've got 64. I about fell out of my chair because it's been a while since we've had interest in National Board Certification like we're seeing this year, thanks to the Proviso. So we are going to talk about that. We're going to spend a little bit of time being a bit of a policy wonk, and we're going to learn about the legislation. But I really want to just give you a quick high-level overview of what you can expect if you decide to jump on this process. I will tell you that I went through National Board Certification as a 4th-year teacher. I taught right down the road at Anderson School District 5 at Calvin Academy of the Arts. And so I jumped on as early as I possibly could because there was a supplement in place at that point in time. That was really the carrot that got me interested in the process. And then what I quickly learned was it was not about the supplement, it was about the changes that I was making to the instruction. So everything that I did in my classroom, from how I worked with parents, to how I planned assessment, to the way that I reflected, to how I did my lesson planning, all of that changed through the National Board process. And as a result of that, I was a much better teacher at the end than I was at the beginning. So I firmly believe in this process. I think it makes a difference for us as educators. It really helps us to feel a little bit more efficacy in the work that we're doing in our classrooms, but it makes a difference for our students. So I am so excited that you have a superintendent who is willing to support this process and put together a cohort structure to allow you to go through National Board Certification. Now, I'm going to go ahead and warn you, and you're probably looking at that PowerPoint going, how's she getting through all of this in 30 minutes? Number 1, I talk fast. Number 2, I put in some extra slides. We're not going to take deep dives into all of the slides that I included. I wanted you to have the information to walk away with, hopefully to whet your interest a little bit more. Maybe you would do some research on your own, but it's also some of the slides that we're going to come back to as a part of that cohort structure, and things that we will spend more time talking about, like the 5 core propositions and the architecture of a conversation. So just know that I'm going to go through some of these very, very quickly. I may just say, hey, we're coming back to this later, but I wanted you to have it at your fingertips in case you are one of those people who likes to get in and start doing your own research. So let's do just a quick little bit of information. If you don't mind, if you would at some point in time scan either the QR code on your PowerPoint or what you see up here on the screen, we have to report the number of teachers that we support going through National Board Certification. And so I just need some information from you so that I get a good count of how many people were here today. Okay, keep going. So I included some essential questions. These are the things that my guess is are probably percolating in your brain, those things that you're wondering about. Some of these we'll spend more time on today, others will come back a cohort, you're really going to work on that. And you're going to come up with your own understanding for how National Board views accomplished teaching. We'll talk about this assistance. Mr. John's going to come back up and talk to you a little bit about this cohort structure that we are hoping to be able to put in place here in the district. So what is National Board Certification? Here's what I want you to take away from this slide. It is not the next big thing. It is not the newest thing that's come out. We have a long history with working with National Board, especially in South Carolina. And what we know is that it does make a difference in classrooms. There's a lot of research out there that says having an Nbct, a National Board Certified teacher, means that the students in your classroom learn more, that you can get extra months worth of growth out of them over the course of the year. And if you are an Nbct who mentors an early career teacher, they get like 5 or 6 months of extra growth out of their students. So we know that this process really works. We also know it helps to retain teachers in South Carolina's classrooms. When we're thinking about National Board Certification, they use the term accomplished teaching. That is the goal that we are working towards as we go through National Board. Okay? And they define, National Board defines accomplished teaching through their body of knowledge. So you have the 5 core propositions that you see up here on the slide. That's really their foundational information. Those are their belief statements for what they think accomplished teachers should know and be able to do. And out of those 5 core propositions, we start to put together a picture of what accomplished teaching looks like. And we will spend time through those cohorts really looking at your practice. And we're going to identify the things that you are doing, the things your students are doing, and how those are connected and how we can prove that your students are learning. So that's really where some of this accomplished teaching boils down and what National Board is looking for. Tied to those 5 core propositions are these puzzle pieces. It's the alignment of all of these things fitting together well. So like our instructional goals have got to match our planned activities. If there are gaps in those puzzle pieces, if you have jammed them together, National Board picks up on that. They are looking for alignment from assessment to your planned activities all the way back to your instructional goals, and then being able to prove student learning. All of that comes into play with the architecture of accomplished teaching. And if you remember nothing about what I'm talking about what is National Board Certification, remember this slide. You are going to see it so many times as a National Board candidate. This is the plan, do, review process. We've got the double helix there in the middle. You've got the 5 core propositions going up each side. They're color-coded for the different stops. This is what Nbcts do all the time. This is what National Board is going to expect to see through your videos, through your writing, through the other evidence that you're going to submit of what happens in your classroom on a daily basis. You've got to prove to them that you didn't do it just for that video, that this is what you're doing in your classroom. That you're starting off thinking about your students. Who are they? What they know? What they need to know? Did they eat breakfast this morning? What language do they speak at home? What interests them? Do they work best in small groups, large groups? Can they sit beside Jenna, or do they need to be on the other side of the room? You got to know those kids. Once you know your students, then you're ready to set high worthwhile goals that are appropriate for those students at that point in time. Those of you that teach multiple sections of a course, you have different goals for every single class because the students are different in every single class. Once we've got our goals, then they've got alignment, those puzzle pieces. We're going to implement instruction designed to meet those goals. And so that's where we're going to make all those instructional decisions. We're going to evaluate our students. We're going to use formative assessments. We're going to use self-assessments. We're going to teach our students to write their own goals and figure out how to improve their own processes. We're going to evaluate everything that's going on with that instruction. And we're going to take that information and we're going to use it to reflect. What worked? What didn't? What do I need to do differently? How can I use what I learned about my students today to impact instruction tomorrow? How does this change what I do for the rest of the year? So that reflection piece, if you have talked to an Nbct, they will tell you that National Board taught them to reflect at a really deep and authentic level Not like the kind of reflection that we did when we were in college, where we said, I did this, I did this, I did this. For National Board, it's tying it up in a bow. I made this instructional decision. I provided this opportunity for my students. Here's the result, here's how I know it, and here's how it impacts my instruction going forward. So that reflection piece becomes so very important. Once we reflect, we set those new goals, we implement instruction, we evaluate, we reflect, and it goes on and on forever. This is National Board. That is the process right there. That is what they are expecting you to do. So in the cohort, what we will do early on is spending time taking apart these 5 core propositions and really understanding what National Board means by accomplished practice and accomplished teaching. The other part of the body of knowledge for National Board certification are the standards. So for each certificate area, there are 25 different certificate areas for National Board. There are a set of standards. So the 5 core propositions are very general and very broad. They work for everyone. The standards are where we start to see the specificity for your particular content area and the developmental level of the students that you're starting. Because obviously, when I'm teaching in my 2nd grade classroom, what works for me is probably not the best approach for that 10th grade math teacher at the high school level. So the standards are where we get the specificity. And that's the other part of the body of knowledge that we'll need to spend a lot of time unpacking and making sure that you're very familiar with that. The standards are based on the 5 core propositions. The propositions are very general. The standards are where we get the specificity. This slide just shows you that that's a true statement. So for example, get knowledge of students down here. That is a standard in the early childhood generalist certificate area. Well, that's core proposition number 1. Students know their students, they know their kids that they're working with, they have that in-depth knowledge of them. All right, so that's your quick introduction, sort of what is accomplished teaching. Let's talk about who's eligible, because that's the first barrier we've got to get over. In order to be eligible for National Board certification, number 1, you have to have a bachelor's degree from an accredited institution. If anybody has a degree from an institution outside of the U.S., we need to talk. Okay, because we've got to take some extra steps just to make sure that everything is going to be accepted. Number 2, you have to have 3 years of successful teaching experience under your belt. If this is your 3rd year teaching, you're going to have to wait till next year. You have to wait till your students go home on the last day of school in order to apply and have that 3rd year complete. If you had an encumbered teaching certificate for any one of those 3 years, so if you were on diagnostic assistance and you didn't get credit for that particular year, then that year is not going to count in your 3 years. And my guess is none of this is going to be a problem for anybody in this room. And then if you are teaching a world language, there are some additional prereqs. We probably need to talk. There's an assessment that you have to take ahead of time just to show that you are proficient in that language before National Board will allow you to apply. Fees. And the good thing is, y'all aren't going to have to worry about a lot of these. Most of this is just going to kind of disappear for you. But for your information, if you were doing this completely on your own, there are 4 components. Each one costs $475. You do have to pay a $75 annual registration fee. So for every year you're part of the National Board process, you're going to pay that $75. The district, we're going to hear about that at the end, is probably going to cover most of the rest of this for you. Lucky you. There's some information in there about paying fees. It's very simple. You use your debit card, you're fine there. Deadlines are here. So National Board is a real stickler about deadlines and dates. Just like you typically don't accept a lot of excuses in your classrooms, National Board doesn't take any excuses. So they are going to adhere to these dates unless there's a worldwide pandemic and they make some changes to benefit teachers across the country. We did see that happen the last 2 years. But for the most part, we know we've got to get you registered by February 28th if you're going to do any work this year. Then you're going to purchase your components. And you only purchase the components that you plan to complete that academic year. So don't go in and buy all 4 when the cohort's doing 2 if you are planning to follow the cohort schedule. You only purchase the components you want to complete that year. There are things up here about withdrawal deadlines, e-portfolio submission window. Everything is submitted online now. It's like Dropbox. We'll walk you through it. It's simple, it's easy, it's no big deal. If we jump on to component 1, which I think is going to be next year, in year 2 of the cohort, there's a testing window for that. It usually opens up in early March and runs through mid-June. And so you're going to a Pearson testing site for that. And then we don't get scores. You submit everything. Usually through mid-May, they'll give us that date probably after the holidays. They'll give us the final date in May. We don't get scores until like December the next fall. So it takes National Board a little while to score everything. So I mentioned those 25 different fields of certification. This is barrier number 2. This is the second thing you've got to figure out and be really informed about and make good decisions about. Because I will tell you, I'm very honest, National Board will charge you if you have to change your certificate area, and there's no need to pay them any extra money than what we have to pay them to go through the process. So we want to make good decisions right up front. 25 different certificate areas. They're based on your content knowledge, what you're teaching, and then also the developmental ages of your students. So the grade band or the age span for those students. Pay careful attention to that. Some of you may be on the line. You might be teaching 2nd, 3rd grade, and you can go early childhood, or you can go on an elementary certificate. You really have to think about the age of the students that you're serving. Because 51% of the students in your class have got to be in that age band, where you get this nasty little score from a national board called NS, which is completely not scoreable. And you got to start over again. Okay, so make sure that you know which certificate you want to work on. And there is a link up here. I'm going to leave the PowerPoint so you guys can get the links out of here. There is a document on the National Board website about choosing the right certificate. You need to spend some time in there and decide what's going to work best for you. Quick slide just on here about some growth. And what I want you to take away from this is that we've had over 9,000 Nbcts who were successful with this process in South Carolina. It is tough. It is hard. It is rigorous. Not everybody certifies. But the nice thing about it is we've had over 9,000 people who have been successful, and they've done it in over 9,000 different ways. So what National Board does not require you to do is for everybody to teach a box lesson, and they don't compare you to one another. You're teaching lessons that work for your students. And as long as you can back it up and support it because of your knowledge of student and your knowledge of content, then that's going to come through, and you can make this work in your situation. I've seen it work in lots of really, really unique situations. So let's talk about completing the process. The way National Board currently has it set up, there are 4 components. You can take those components in any order. You don't have to start with one. You can spread this out. So you have to make an initial attempt at all 4 components in 3 years. The way that we structure it with the cohorts, what we're recommending happens here in Anderson 2, is that you do 2 components this year and 2 components next year. That's where we see the most professional learning taking place. If you try to cram all 4 in, you might be successful, but you're probably not learning as much as what you could through the process. You also have 2 opportunities to retake components. So this could be up to a 5-year process. You could stretch it out that long if you needed to, especially if you had some retakes in there. And retakes are not anything to be ashamed about. It is your opportunity to learn and grow a little bit more. And that's how National Board approaches it. So component 1, this is your computer-based assessment. So you will sign up to go to a Pearson testing facility at a date and time that you select, and you will be tested primarily on content knowledge for your certificate area. It feels a little bit like Praxis, kind of. They also are going to pull in some pedagogy here. So they're going to expect that you're able questions about how would you maybe approach this? If a student was struggling in this particular area, how would you approach it? When you're there, you've got to demonstrate that knowledge of developmentally appropriate content. That's going to come through in some of their questions. The assessment center is broken up into 2 different sections. So in the first part, you're going to do 3 constructive response exercises, open-ended. So National Board's going to give you some information. Could be about a student, could be some documents for you to review. It could be maybe some student work. And then they're going to ask you some questions, and you are going to frantically type as fast as you can for 30 minutes, and you're going to tell them everything you know. Everything that would answer those questions, good response, but really prove your content knowledge, your developmentally appropriate content knowledge, and your pedagogy. You'll do 3 of those. We never know what the questions are ahead of time. The National Board gives us some retired prompts. They also give us some topics that we may be able to dig into to be able to do a little bit of preparation. You're also going to have 45 SRIs, selective response items. It's multiple choice. Okay? 45 of those. For most of us, we're getting 60 minutes to do that. A couple of our certificate areas, our ELA, our math, our physics and chemistry folks, they're going to get 75 minutes. So they're probably doing a little bit more reading, a little bit more calculation than what the rest of us have to do. The SRIs, those multiple choice questions, they are going to be auto-scored, but that does not mean that you get the score when you walk out of Pearson testing facility. National Board likes to hold you in suspense, so you won't get it till the fall, and they have until December 31st to get that information to us. Second component, and I promise you, in the cohorts, we're going to spend a lot of time really going deep in this. This is high-level overview. But component 2, this is one of the ones that I think we'll be working on in the district this year. It's differentiation of instruction. So differentiation is in the title. We know what it's going to be about. They're looking for how you are meeting student needs in your classrooms. It is a classroom-based portfolio entry. So that means that you are going to gather information about your students in your identified class. You are going to teach them lessons. You're going to assess. You're going to analyze. You're going to reflect. You're going to do it again. This is the architecture of accomplished teaching and practice. So you're going to go through everything on that double helix a couple times, and you're going to write about it for National Board, because they're going to give you some prompts, some questions that you have to answer, and you're going to respond to all of that. You're also going to be submitting student work as a part of it. So we'll talk about that process for getting permission to be able to submit student work through the National Board process. Component 3 is the heaviest lift of the 4 components, in my opinion. This is your video-based component. So you are going to videotape yourself in your classroom multiple times. And you're going to watch those, and you're going to laugh, and you're going to realize it's time to color my hair, I should never wear that outfit again. All kinds of things are going to come out, but you're going to learn an awful lot about your practice and your students through it. We'll probably pick up component 3 next year along with component 1. So in component 3, we see on the second bullet some of the focus there, planning, evaluation, reflection, all of that's going to come into play. Anybody who is working with exceptional needs, if that's your certificate area, you can use 1 student for this particular component. The 4th one is the convoluted component. I will tell you, it feels a little bit like they took everything else and smushed it together, but I think we've got it broken down in a way that makes it easy to tackle. So within component 4 is the effective and reflective practitioner. You are going to gather information on a group of students. It is very, very similar to your SLO. So similar, in fact, that I would encourage you to say to use the same group of students and maybe some of your same goals for both component 4 and your SLO. Let's get credit for 2 different things here. National boards don't make you go deeper. They're going to make you do more than the state of South Carolina does, but it gives you a starting point. So we're going to do this group of students, the profile on them. We're going to write about some of our formative and summative assessments that we're using in our classroom. We're demonstrating our assessment literacy through this particular component. And on this little piece down here, participation in a learning community. So for National Board, a learning community is other professionals, families and parents, the community at large, where you're serving as a leader, a learner, a collaborator, or an advocate. And so you get that opportunity to set some student goals and also some goals for yourself and move forward and try to reach those goals. I promise, we can break it down, we can make this feel very, very doable. All three of the portfolio components have a written commentary that go along with them. So even with the video-based entry, you are doing some writing. You do have to answer those questions. You've got to answer those prompts. The National Board has a lot of rules for how they do that. So the scoring process, just very, very quickly. One of the things that I really like about National Board is that it is a performance-based scoring system. And you are evaluated by your peers. So as an early childhood generalist, I'm evaluated when I go through the National Board process, but other people who teach in the same content, same grade band as me, okay? So people who know what it's like to be in that second grade classroom on Halloween, they get that. Same thing's gonna be true for you. You have to make sure that the evidence that you submit is clear, consistent, and convincing. We're gonna like pound those 3 C's into your head. You're gonna hear us ask all the time, is that convincing? Can you be clearer? How do we know this is what you do in your classroom all the time? How can you use your language to get that across to National Board and to convince them that this is what goes on? You do get a separate score for each of the components that you attempt, and they're going to give you some information about, you know, what you did well, or maybe what you could improve upon, so you can decide if you want to retake. Don't get excited; it's a drop down. They're just giving you some pretty general information back, but we can use that to kind of help us decide whether or not you want to retake a component. So a little more on scoring for those SRIs, as I mentioned, they are those are your multiple choice. They are auto-scored. You get 1 point for each correct answer, 0 points for incorrect, so we guess. We don't know, we take a guess, because it doesn't hurt us going through there. National Board is going to convert that numerical score to a score between 0 and 4.25. Y'all, 4.25 is A+++++++. That is the best we can do with National Board. We are going to celebrate well below 4.25. We're going to celebrate things like 2.5s and 2.75s and 3.0s. But that's the highest that you can get. For all the portfolio components, those constructed response exercises also at the Assessment Center, there's a 12-point scale. So it's that 1 to 4 with a plus and minus, and 4.25 is that 4+. So you see that down here at the bottom. There's that nasty little score, NS not scoreable. That's when you're outside of your developmental area, when you didn't follow directions, or National Board thinks you cheated. So we don't want any NSs. We see very little of those in here. Here's how it all plays out. So C2, 3, and 4, these are your portfolio components. So your student work, your video, and that effective and reflective practitioner. 60% of your total National Board score is coming from your portfolio components. 40% is coming from component 1, that's the Assessment Center. So you'll see the SRIs, the multiple choice questions, 20% there, 6.67% for each of the constructive response exercises. You have to meet the floor score. So when they do their magic in here, and they put in the weighting, and they convert everything from that numerical, you have to have an average of at least 1.75 on component 1, all the multiple choice and all the constructive response, in order to certify. It doesn't matter if you got 4.25s across the board over here. If you have a 1 here, you can't certify. You got to hit that floor score. Same thing happens over here. It's 1.75 average. That's the minimum in order to move forward towards certification. It's not going to be a problem. We'll get you well past that. Here's what I just went through with you. It's exactly what I just described. Remember, I told you that you can retake. So if those scores are not high enough to get you where you want to be, then you do have that opportunity to retake. But National Board is going to charge you for it. So basically, you're paying the $425 again. go through that process. If you got to do and retake some component 1, they do break it up a little bit with the selected response items and then those constructed responses. Coming back over here, because I want you to pay attention to bullet number 2, that total weighted score has to be 110. Okay, so that's when they put all the weightings back in. You have to have 110 total points in order to certify and meet those 4 requirements. All right, let's talk the proviso real quick. So last spring, out of the blue, the General Assembly said we're going to change the National Board Proviso. You can thank Senator Hembry for it. He really took the lead on this. And the way the proviso is written, it is a mess of a proviso. But the way it is written, it now says that anyone who goes through the National Board process and is successful and certifies can receive the salary supplement at the annual level of $5,000 as long as they maintain certification. That's huge, because previously they weren't paying the supplement for any new Nbcts. They were capping it at 5 years. They were capping it at 10 years. Even way, way back when I went through it, they still were capping it. They were saying you could only get the supplement for this length of time. They took all of that away with you. They're saying if you certify, you maintain certification, so this is a 5-year certificate. Every 5 years you got to re-up. It's not as bad as a first-time candidate. As long as you maintain certification, you can continue to get the supplement at the $5,000 level. Now, there are some other sort of pieces here that you need to be aware of. You have to be full-time. If you are part-time, it's going to be prorated depending on the number of hours or the number of days that you work within the district. You have to be in a supplement-eligible position. So that's something that we will want to check once we get everybody sort of into groups, knowing who's going to jump onto the cohorts, to make sure that you truly are in a supplement-eligible position before you start paying any money. You can certainly go through it because you want to grow, but my guess is a lot of you are here, the carrot was, like for me, that's supplement. So let's make sure of that before we start paying any money. But typically those classroom-based positions, teaching positions, as long as you're not in administration, as long as you're not housed at the district office, you're probably okay. Even some of our coaches, as long as they're school-based, working with students, still going to be eligible for that national board supplement. You do still have to meet all of those state requirements, Read to Succeed, Jason Platt Act, all of those kinds of things. You still got to go through ADAPT. All of that is still going to apply, but you do have this opportunity to collect the supplement. Yes, sir?
So pending annual legislation.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a proviso. Proviso is annual legislation. Here's the thing, though. What we have seen from the General Assembly in the past, I never guarantee anything with the General Assembly, but I've been doing this for a long time. And I can tell you that when they make changes, they make it at the end of the fiscal year. So there are currently 4 buckets of Nbcts in the state based on the date that they applied and the legislation that was in place at that time. So if you apply now, this is what the rule is. So even if they took it away, they would say, you know, we're going to pay out for the first certificate. Maybe they would take away that opportunity to continue to get the money by going through maintenance of certification. But we have not seen them ever go back and say, we promised you $5,000, now we're taking that away. So I do feel very confident that if you apply now, you are looking at $5,000 for at least 5 years. I do think it's going to be longer. There's a lot of conversation about putting this in the salary schedule. To just do away with provisos because we are tired of fighting it. Put it in salary schedule or codify it. Let's put it in statute and not worry about it anymore. But great question. Don't worry about it right now. I think that you're okay, especially for that first 5 years. All right, so I gave you some homework on here, things that you can go and read, people you can talk to, what you can expect as you go through the process. Really just making sure you're reading a lot, and you're staying up on the information that is coming out. So for example, National Board over the last 2 years has put into effect some COVID-19 allowances. want to know, because they might say, hey, you don't have to have quite as many students in your class. You don't have to do this, or you don't have to do that. So just staying on top of all of that information. I gave you some information here to help you make a decision about whether or not you want to go through this. Links to some sources and resources, and then contact information. So I'm Jenna Hallman. You are welcome to reach out to me. Suzanne Cody is my colleague that works with National Board. She just accepted the Service Program Director position at Sarah, so she is going to lead the National Board efforts across the state, the support efforts. She's high school English certified, been through renewal once. I'm early childhood generalist, been through renewal once. And I'm a current MOC candidate, because even though I don't get the supplement, I believe in this process, so I'm going to go through maintenance of certification this year, because it means something to have those 4 letters after my name. Thank you so much for giving me some time today. I promise you're going to get a lot more information through the cohorts. I'm going to let Mr. Johns come up and talk a little bit, and then I'll probably add a little bit more about the cohorts as he's sharing information, but that's just a very high-level overview. I hope you'll consider this and kind of jump on and take advantage of this opportunity.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Hallman. So this is kind of what we're going to do after this. You'll receive, I actually send it out to all of the teachers, an email with probably a Google form where you can kind of sign up expressing that you're interested in doing this. If you think, and there'll be a deadline that's going to give you a week or two to think about it. If you say you're interested, kind of what you're signing up for is submitting the application, paying the $75 to submit the application, and you're committing that you're going to go through it for 2 years. Okay, that's what you're signing up for. So kind of spend the next week or two thinking about it. If you decide to do that, this is kind of what it'll look like. Based on the numbers, we'll divide you up into groups of maybe 10 to 15, probably closer to 10. And then we'll kind of see how many cohorts we're looking at. Each cohort will have an in-district mentor who's a current National Board certified teacher. Initially, and Dr. Hallman has told us this, initially, at least the first year, maybe even the first part of the second year, we'll meet once, probably twice a month during the first year, just to get you a good sound start. And what you'll find as you go through the second half of the process is you just need time to work together. You already know what to do. You just need a quiet space with folks who are doing the same thing to work with and give you feedback. There will probably be a couple of Saturday sessions that we'll offer. So as a group, you can kind of show your video, kind of talk about the reflections, kind of get feedback from current National Board certified teachers who kind of will be the same kind of folks who will be grading your submissions, so that when you submit that, you'll get back a good to go as opposed to a you got to do it again. Because when you send that off, we want you to be very well equipped to get back a response from National Board. You're good. And then that's kind of what it'll look like. So it'll all start with you just kind of thinking about, is this something I want to do? And then indicating that when we send out a communication. What questions do we have for Dr. Hallman or for me? We will make this PowerPoint available to everybody in our district. So if there's anybody at your building who was interested but they couldn't come, that's totally understandable. I'll send them that this Friday so they have that. Anything for the good of the group?
I would add that the cohort meetings, the way we typically do that, they run 2 to 3 hours at a time after school. We encourage snacks and change into your yoga pants and whatnot. Be comfortable. Bring your computer. Typically start off with some information for everyone, and then there is some work to do where you're diving into standards, you're talking about differentiation, you're thinking about what has to be included with that particular component, and then we throw out some questions for discussion, and then there's some work time at the end so that you have that collaborative opportunity to get feedback. What we talked about today is that probably knowing that you're working on assessment here in the district, that we probably want to tackle components 2 and 4 this year. That's probably the way to go. We'll say the assessment center when you're more familiar with national board standards, and the video for next year when we're starting out a little bit earlier. But 2 and 4, I think, would be doable for you this year, especially with your focus within the district.
We're gonna do 2 and 4 between February and the end of the school year.
No. You're going to be starting very, very soon.
But the registration deadline was February 28th.
Yeah, but you can apply now. You have until February 28th to do that. And you can, all the materials are on the National Board website, so you can access them before you ever pay them any money. So if you guys are going to do this, I'm going to be pushing this train very, very quickly that by mid-October, you are meeting and you are familiarizing yourself with that National Board body of knowledge. You got to be going into Thanksgiving comfortable with that.
Yes, ma'am.
For the 475, is that something that we are responsible for paying?
The district is gonna, the only financial burden you're gonna commit to is $75 to apply. Yep, that's a great question. Any of you that are hesitant or you're not ready to commit, is there a particular reason that's causing that hesitancy? Yes, ma'am.
Just because this isn't a typical school year, so kind of a little bit nervous about how much this is gonna add on to our plate on top of what we're already having to do, just because of the needs of the students. I mean, these students have been in an old classroom for a long time, so, that kind of put me in a little bit of a sticky situation here, just because I don't know how much I'm about to throw on the plate.
Yeah.
You're paying $75 to get $25,000.
Right. I'm just worried about how much time that 25,000 is going.
And it'll be a lot of work. That's a great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. It will be a lot of work. It will. So you kind of have to, that's a individual decision we all have to make. You're not going to do it alone. You're going to do it with your peers. You're going to do it with the support of people who have gone through it before. Just kind of having gone through it, just the reflective process that you have to do to kind of think through your instructional decisions, that's the best professional development you can get. We've talked about this before, y'all. The best professional development that you can get outside of your own experiences is sitting in this room right now. This will be more powerful than any conference or workshop or anything else that you can do. But you're right, it is extra work. Yes, ma'am.
This is a very individualized question to myself. So I teach theater, and while I'm ELA, I'm no longer ELA because I'm in the fine arts department, and there's not a fine arts certificate, and I'm not qualified to teach art. So I would have to certify with ELA, but my classes aren't technically ELA. They would be theater. So they don't look nearly anything like an ELA classroom. Would that hurt me in going through the components? Because I'm not conventional.
Right. You can borrow a class if you need to teach those ELA lessons, if that's something the district is willing to let you do. What I would encourage you to do is to pull the standards from the National Board website for your ELA certificate area, pull the component instructions, and take a look at that and see if there is a way to make it work within your current classroom. My guess is you probably can, but you're the expert on that, and so you're going to have to feel comfortable with it and make that decision. But we can certainly talk if we need to, and especially after you've done a little bit of reading.
We're librarians, and so my question was, with the cohort that we are assigned to, is that taken into consideration? Because I really feel I'm going to gain a whole lot by being with them during this process. And I know there are enough of us to make a cohort, but maybe special areas, would they be able to?
So what we talked about is once we see who is jumping on, who's willing to go through this, and we start to identify your certificate areas, then we'll start to put cohorts together, and they may be mixed cohorts at times. Because there is a benefit for you as a media specialist, a librarian, to meet with the early childhood folks. They're going to benefit from you. They may give you something that works really well in their classroom that you could then use in your media center. So sometimes we're going to push you outside of your certificate area. Other times we'll try to keep you with those people who speak the same language as you and are working on the same approach with those components. So yes and no.
Good question.
If we decide that this is not the right time for us, do you expect that this will be an opportunity?
Depending on the reason we're doing it this year is because of the proviso that was put in place in July. So just like Dr. Hallman said, they've never changed one they've put out. So even though it's for 5 years, you know, the practice of the legislature is if you do it this year, you'll get it for the rest of your career as long as you keep re-upping.
Yeah, as long, or at least through that 5 years, because they could change the proviso enough to say, wait, no, we get all new people in the Senate or the House, and they change it and say, no, we're only gonna pay it for 5 years for everybody who applied in 2021. But I don't see them ever taking it away while you're currently certified. We haven't seen that happen in the past. Other thing to kind of keep in mind, other thing to keep in mind, like the funding that is being used to pay for this comes from the Rural Recruitment Initiative, and of course, that's annual as well.
So that's a great question. The 2 reasons we're doing this year is one, is we have rural recruitment money to use, which is covering the 475 4 times for each teacher. We may not get that next year.
That was my
So
question.
that's,
From a
yep.
district standpoint,
Yep.
would you guys be able to support another cohort in the future, but that's the current.
We would look at it. If we had rural recruitment money, that'd be an easy yes. If we don't, we'll see. So,
Thank
yep,
you.
yep. Yes, ma'am?
So if we were to start in October, when would that, like the first 2 components get done? You don't really have to think with your kids all year long, right?
So, I assume you're middle or secondary, right? So what we would do with that particular cohort, what I would recommend is you're spending October and November really on those deep dives into the body of knowledge for National Board and starting to think about what you're going to do. There are some things that will carry over even though you have different students, especially within component 4, but the work for component 2 in particular, you probably would want to start until after the holidays, but you can plan for that. You can get a lot of things in place.
Yes, ma'am.
If at some point during your 2-year process, your content area changes, whether due to student numbers or COVID, that you're teaching a different subject, would then you just borrow another class like you were taking? Okay.
Yeah, don't start over, borrow.
Yeah, that's what I'm, okay.
Yes, sir.
So they wrote the proviso this past year.
Yep,
It's good for 5 years,
that was annual.
but what was the 5-year deal?
That's the National Board Certificate is 5 years.
Okay.
So what they have always done in the past is that if they put the proviso in place, anybody who applies when that proviso is in place, they are going to adhere to the rules of the proviso at least through the length of the current National Board certification.
So even if they made it law this year, and they were to change it, but then we started, we're at least looking 5 years.
Yeah, that,
When we finish, which
they
might
have,
be 2
they
years.
have never reneged on that. They have always adhered to that, and so that's where these different groups come in, and they make the changes as of the next fiscal year. So they would say anybody who applied after July 1, 2022 is governed by this piece of legislation. And I will tell you, I think we will see a tweak on the proviso just to make it clear, because it is a mess right now and nobody really can decipher it. So I think they'll clean it up, but they won't change the rules.
We'll be sure the carrot's still looking good, that's what I.
The carrot is still good. I don't see any spots on the carrot right this time.
It's a little moldy on the backside.
Well,
You got an ant in your nose.
Look, if it starts getting moldy, I will be the first one to tell you.
Those are great questions. Anything else? All right, we'll send this out to you on Friday, and thank y'all for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Hallman. Yes, ma'am.